303,000 individuals. That's about 0.004% of all humans alive, or 1 in every 24,000 people you come across that are subscribed to this channel. But considering we've amassed nearly 60 million views, that's almost 1% of the planet. Truly a very humbling experience for myself, and I want you all to know that obviously I couldn't have done it without all of you. As many of you are aware, it's become somewhat of a tradition on this channel to take a census of my audience every year in the month of December to get an interesting look at the one nation that all of you here can claim to be a part of, the Masamen. Despite all our differences in what country we live in, our native languages, our religions, ethnicity, politics, ideologies, identities, everyone here has at least some measure of respect and curiosity for many different groups of people around the planet and their histories. And I've got to say, I've learned a lot and improved over the years as well. So in my past channel censuses, I've asked many questions, but primarily over ancestry, religion, and political affiliations. And what I've learned has been quite mind-blowing to say the least, as this year's census was bigger and better and more detailed than ever before, as I've taken in many suggestions from comments, as well as just including questions that I thought would be the most relevant and interesting to myself and others. So it was actually quite a bit longer than any in the past, and hence we didn't have quite as many participants as last year, but with an impressive 6,000 plus respondents, I feel like I got a pretty good sample size of the channel audience, so we might as well get started with the first couple questions regarding language. An astounding 50% of the Masamen speak or understand 3 or more languages, with over 80% speaking at least 2 languages, as only 40% actually speak English natively. So I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who speaks English as a second, third, or even fourth language, as without your support, the channel wouldn't be anywhere near the size it is today. The next largest spoken languages would be Spanish at around 9%, followed by Portuguese, German, Dutch, Hindi, Swedish, French, Russian, and Arabic, with all other languages adding up to around 25% of the total. And there were even some pretty obscure languages represented, such as Papiamento, a mixed Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, Creole spoken in Aruba and Curacao, or Tibetan, Circassian, Afrikaans, Swahili, Assamese, or many other diverse tongues from around the world. I also allowed people to write in both their country of birth and current country of residence for this year, and I feel like this was really eye-opening in capturing people's stories. And keep in mind, only a third of the Masamen were born in my home country of the United States of America, and this was a little difficult to count considering how many people simply put US, USA, America, United States, or some other abbreviated answer, while India was the second most common response, followed by the UK, Canada, Brazil, Germany, Sweden, and Australia. Next, for Ancestry, I had 3 questions. The first asking for a single ethnicity, the second allowing you to check off multiple ethnicities, and the third allowed you to write in your own ethnic or ancestral background in as much detail as you'd like, which really shed some light on some of these entries. Now, I did allow for a much higher degree of specification in this year's census than ever before, which I was hesitant to do in the past out of a fear that people wouldn't take it seriously, but I took a chance with the maturity level of my audience, and I'm happy to say the vast majority of people not only took it seriously, but really went above and beyond in sharing their own personal stories, which I did read, by the way. For instance, number 5808 gets it. This man from Kenya says his native languages are Oromo and Kikuyu, is of multiple African ancestries in the first question over ethnicity, and goes on to specify in the second question, where you can check off multiple ancestries, that he has Bantu and Cushitic heritage, and explains in the third option, which is a write-in, that his father is an Oromo while his mother is a Kikuyu. Or look at number 5892 from Malaysia, who checked off Dravidian and wrote in Tamil under specific ethnicity, or number 2282 from South Africa, who checked off multiracial African Creole, then checked off Bantu, Germanic, and Anglo, and specified that he was of the colored ethnicity. Other rather interesting submissions include number 1727 from Cuba, who was born to Afro-Iranian and Afro-Cuban parents, or number 5748 from the United States, who was born to a Pakistani father and Korean-Filipino mom, quite a colorful combination, or number 4903, a Mormon from Norway, but now living in the United States, of Sami and Kiribati Pacific Islander ancestry, or even 4,774, an English-speaking South African of English, Scottish, Dutch, and French ancestry, now living in Taiwan. So, although only given a limited amount of space to express their identities, I feel like the questions asked in this year's census really allows people to accurately tell the unique stories of their own ancestry, beliefs, and backgrounds, which I feel like is something that pretty much everyone has some curiosity over, but might sometimes be afraid to ask others about. There were no major changes to last year regarding overall makeup, with the European descended percentage pretty much remaining the same at 62%, while the Latino and African categories saw the largest decline, with South Asian seeing the biggest increase, and for what reason, I cannot imagine. The one category that has seen a clear and consistent decline, or at least stagnation throughout the years, would be the multiracial category. And I'll admit, the first year even I was surprised the percentage that claimed to be multiracial was less than 5%, as judging from some of the comments I receive on my videos about people describing their own ancestry, I thought for sure it would have been a lot higher, 10% at least. However, I explained this away in my first video over the census, as a huge percentage of people who only claimed one race or ethnicity also had ancestry from a completely different people group, such as a large number of self-identified white people who also claim Native American or African or Asian ancestry, up to 20% in my first census, and probably around the same for this one as well. I did differentiate between Latinos, Creoles, and people with more recent racial intermixing, and even though they don't speak a Creole language, Latinos could technically be considered the world's largest Creole group, numbering in the hundreds of millions worldwide. But in this context, Creole is specifically referring to multi-ethnic people groups from colonial times, such as the Cape Coloreds, Anglo-Indians, or Dutch Indos. Europe, Oceania, and North America were the only regions where a majority of the population identified as white, although in Latin America and the Caribbean, from Argentina to Mexico, whites were a plurality at around 39%. And interestingly enough, in Southern Africa, including South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, nearly half of all respondents, around 46%, identified as white, which is an extreme overrepresentation compared to the general population of this region, but this could have been expected. The largest single ancestral category, same as last year, would be those of English or Anglo descent, followed by Germanics, mixed Europeans, Celts, Indo-Aryans, and Mestizos. Similarly to last year, by doing an enumeration of all who identified as Hispanic or Latino, we were able to see that a surprisingly high number, around 42% this year, identify as white, while the rest mostly identify with mixed groups like the Mestizos, Mulattoes, or Pardos. And as I said last year, this is about the same as the demographic makeup of Venezuela, although keep in mind many of these self-identified white Hispanics also claimed Amerindian, African, or Middle Eastern admixture. Moving on to religion, there were some slight changes from previous years, with the largest increase for any single religious group being among Hindus, and I honestly have no idea how they jumped from merely 1.7% in 2017 to 4.6% in 2019, increasing from 30% of all South Asians to nearly 45%, while adherents of Judaism doubled from 1.2 to 2.4%, and European neo-pagans increased from 2.6 to 3.4% after a slight fall. However, Christianity continues to be the largest religion at 34%, a slight decrease from last year, with Catholics making up nearly half of all Christians, making it the largest religious group, followed by Protestants, with Sunni Muslims just barely beating out adherents to Orthodox Christianity, with the Islamic percentage more or less remaining stable, if not increasing slightly. Rather surprisingly, those who identify as irreligious, which includes agnostics, deists, and those who identify as spiritual or culturally a part of a religious group, but not practicing, continue to decline, despite the atheist percentage more or less remaining stable, dropping from a third to a fourth within 2 years. I was also rather surprised that only 1% identified themselves as anti-theist, meaning anti-religion, so they appear to be a very loud and vocal minority. And to be honest, I don't think the majority of people care much for the religious, spiritual beliefs of others, or at least are far more apathetic than most would assume, although, as I've mentioned in the past, there is quite a strong connection between people's religious and ethnic identities, even if they aren't fully aware as to why. Moving on to the last question regarding political affiliation, this was also quite eye-opening, as contrary to what many may think, although there was indeed some correlation regarding religion and ethnicity with politics, I saw all kinds of seemingly unusual combinations, such as a Catholic Marxist, or an anti-theist National Socialist, or a traditionalist Mormon. Well, that last one's really not all too odd. But taking a look at the entries, I think I did a pretty good job at encompassing the entire political spectrum, and allowing people to check multiple options truly allowed people to express their own nuanced ideologies. And as to why so many of the larger ideologies had such a marked decline, I can't say for sure, but it's most likely due to the fact that I included a bit more options than last time, and hence they may have felt that one of the newer choices described their political leanings better than the more mainstream categories. I did also include a few additional questions that more or less went along the lines of the 8 values political test, such as asking people to rate themselves in regards to economic, immigration, and cultural issues. Being far left on issues of immigration doesn't necessarily make one a proponent of open borders, just like being far right doesn't make you anti-immigrant, as the Overton window shifts dramatically with time and country. For instance, some economic policies of Europe that would be considered conservative would be considered quite progressive in the United States. Or another example would be some nationalist groups in Russia who support the repatriation and immigration of ethnic Russians from former parts of the Soviet Union back to Russia. I know it might seem like today there are just 2 growing factions of people who are diametrically opposed to one another, but if you take a look, it becomes clear that the political spectrum is actually quite evenly distributed, with a slight clustering in the center, for my channel at least, so I have yet to see evidence of a dramatic shifting to the extremes. And lastly, when looking at the marital status of the Masamen, once again, the vast majority, around 87%, are unmarried for whatever reason. And considering the median age is around the mid-30s and 94% are male, this should tell you something about the average subscriber of mine. That's right, looks like we're all living the bachelor life. So thanks everyone who participated in this year's census, and thanks to all my subscribers and viewers. Make sure you let me know your thoughts on this year's results, and for today's poll, let me know which results you found to be the most interesting or surprising. And as always, this has been Mason. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.